Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining me, everyone. My guest today is Bo Stewart. Bo is one of the founders and co-owners of American Milsim, an Airsoft Milsim event company in, you guessed it, the United States,
Hmm.
running some of the most well-known recurring Airsoft Milsim events. So some that you've definitely heard of, such as Copperhead, Reindeer Games, and the upcoming Ironhorse, which we are going to be attending at the end of June. If you watch much content on social media, if you have, certain content creators that you follow, you've almost certainly seen one of them attending an event that Bo had a hand in running. Bo picked up airsoft in the mid 2000s, back when he ran a video game store, quickly got involved with some event organizers, turning that hobby into a passion project. He's been involved with AMS for the last 15 years, and with national level events every month, he's no stranger to providing the kinds of experiences that many, if not most, airsofters just dream of playing. So, Bo, thank you so much for being on.
Oh man, no problem. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah. Listen, just firstly, I want to take you back to the early days for you. Like when you first heard from JP and Frosty in Oklahoma, who were starting their own airsoft event company, and you're getting involved with that. Did you have a vision at that time that these events were going to take off to the level and to the scale that they have today?
Honestly, no. We before us was a company called Milsim Event, and after we realized that this could be much more, and we wanted to make some changes, American Milsim kind of just happened overnight. I remember Frosty looked at me and said, we just need to do our own company, and let's just call it American Milsim. I'm like, okay. And then it was two of us. And then he said, we got to get JP involved. And then, of course, Rick. And then we were able to have, four owners, which is difficult, obviously, with four different personalities, et cetera. But we had a real solid upbringing for AMS for a good 7-8 years with four of us. And it's one of those things where you put the time and the effort in, and we're fortunate enough to have good people and a good community. And we just really grew it a lot faster than we thought. And next thing you know, here we are, 13, like you said, 13, 14 years later. And we've got almost 80 events under our belt. And it's been a ride. I can tell you that. It has been crazy.
Yeah, 80 events. I mean, for someone who, if you know anything about event organizing, running 80 events, like that's not a small number.
It is not.
I'm really curious. So, from your perspective, like, what do you think has contributed to the popularity of AMS events? Like, what have you done differently, sort of, over throughout the years that has given your events the longevity that they've had, and the ability as well, I think, to weather the more difficult, leaner airsoft years that we're sort of coming out of now in
Right.
2020s.
Man, that's a really good question. I think some of the things that we try to focus on with AMS is in the beginning, it was obviously a good venue. Then it was really focusing on how we could go to the customers and make sure they had the best experience possible. And that was a very trying time because we were all new to event promoting, how to have a good game. And we always thought, hey man, what do we want to do? If we're going to go to a big game, what do we want to do all weekend? And so we put together our minds, tried to figure out game designs. And once we started getting getting our bearings on that, then the next thing was finding venues. And I think that's one thing that AMS we're very proud of is that we have brought a lot of top tier facilities to the airsoft community as a whole in the United States. And
Hmm.
once we were able to acquire a facility, show the facility, hey, we are a valuable resource for you. We're going to have a great game. We're going to leave zero footprint and responsible, et cetera, et cetera. Then we started getting more venues as time progressed. And then one thing we very much take seriously is the feedback from players. We used to beg people to send in emails and offer them discounts if they told us what they liked and didn't like. And short-windedly, it was very customer oriented. Right? That's
Hmm.
what we wanted to do, was to have a good event, listen to the customers, treat each customer, each email, each question like it was the single most important thing in our business. And we really were able to grow a good following doing that. And I think that was a big part of it, actually.
So it's interesting to hear you talk about sort of like a good event because again, as someone who's organized events in my professional life, I should say, as
Right.
an event organizer, your perspective of how the event is proceeding is often tainted by the knowledge that you have of how things should have been or what you had
Correct.
planned or so on. So it can very often feel like it's going on, like the wheels are falling off. But to the players, everything is fine. So I'm curious, from your perspective, like how did you in the early days and maybe even today, how do you define a successful event? Like what did good mean to you?
Well, I would say the the 10,000 foot view that's very abbreviated really would be if I don't get players walking up to me and complaining or asking about certain things that, let me back up. Now that I'm doing adminning where I'm not playing, a lot of times players will walk up to me and discuss things with me. And a lot of times what we try to do, trying to get this the right way, is we want the game to be as even as possible without having a 50-yard line. So
Hmm.
our combat, our game control in the background, a lot of players don't know this, a lot of people don't know this, but we have a very sophisticated system on the back end of trying to herd the cats, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. So, our COs and our XOs build this plan, and the plan is we try to execute it as best as we can, but a lot of factors fall into communication and the AO and the heat and the player base. Because what people don't understand is when you travel the country, right, you are significantly changing your player base from Northeast to the Southwest to the Southeast to the center, the Midwest. It's completely different personalities, completely different expectations. And most of the time, the player feedback is what we decide if it was a good game or not. And we listen.
Hmm.
And I listen to the players after the game. They walk up to me all during the game, after the game, Sunday morning. Oh my God, it was the greatest day ever. Oh, we had the best time. This game is awesome. The field is great. And when the feedback is overwhelming, you feel like it's working. But we have had times, just like
Hmm.
anybody, where players are coming up going, dude, what is going on? Right. And there's a lot of factors that
Yeah.
go into that. But I would tell you 10,000 foot overview of if a game is successful or not is really the feedback from the players. And we value that heavily. And also game
Hmm.
control. Game control will tell us how the vibe was all throughout the day from both COs, from the platoon lead, because we hear all the chatter all day long. And we really get a good sense of the movement and the attitude and the vibe in the fobs and the activity in the fob. If there's a lot of people sitting in the fob all day complaining, well, then we know we got to make some changes. So we try to make it as dynamic as we can throughout the day. But at the end, it really is on the player. We have stuff all day long for them to do and to work on. But at the end of the day, if they're not out doing what they need to be doing, then that can have a big factor in whether they have a good time or not, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and it's really interesting because your events, as we've talked about, like they're widely recognized, right? Everyone, again, in the airsoft community, in the airsoft space, everyone knows what Copperhead is, right? Like,
Yeah.
so as a result of that, though, and you also mentioned like you're traveling from the Northeast to the Southwest and vice versa. Like, um, people who are not from America or Canada might not grasp just how big that geography is, right? Like, for our European listeners, like just load up Google Maps. Like, it's huge, right? So obviously you're going to have a disparity in the types of players who are showing up just from like culturally, personality wise, etc. But also because you're making it so wide, right? You're trying to appeal to as many people as possible. You
Right.
will have all kinds of airsofters knocking at your door, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, point of fact, you look at Ironhorse this year, you have people who are coming from Canada and from
Right.
Australia to play this game. And I
Right.
can guarantee you that the way I play airsoft in St. John's, Newfoundland is not the same way that you guys play airsoft down in Perry, Georgia. So I guess my question for you is looking at all of that and all these players who are looking at AMS as like the premier airsoft event, how do you create the kind of experience that is both like accessible to all of these players, right? But
Right.
also provides engaging opportunities for players regardless of their, if it's their first milsim or their 15th or their 50th.
Yeah, that is a great question, and that is what we really pride ourselves on. Because with AMS, I believe that, and we've heard this in the back. Speaking to some other players, and I remember one of my buddies had mentioned this, and he's right. He kind of summarized it for us. Is I think AMS casts the largest net. And what I mean by
Mm-hmm.
that is amongst all the event promoters in the country, I believe that we get the most variety of players, from your brand new player who has never stepped foot even in a regional or local game, to somebody who's played 20 AMS events, 30 AMS events, who's played 20 Third Coast, 20 Milsim West. So naturally, it's very difficult to have, quote unquote, a restaurant that can serve everyone. And so
Mhm.
what we do is that we set our games up dynamically where, and this is kind of a 10,000 foot view, but I love talking about this because this is what we really work on, is that, for instance, we have all of our capture points, right? So we'll have 6, 7, 10 capture points strategically placed all around the field, and they're simply by changing a flag. That appeals to the first time airsofter, the middle of the row airsofter, the hardcore airsofter, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody can do that. Then we
Mhm.
have missions, which are strategically placed items or things around the AO that pop up either through intel that's been given or through missions that we drop personally that we do throughout, that has a little bit wider, what's the right word, a wider grip on the players, who are now, instead of just a couple of people grabbing a flag, now we grab a platoon, a little more specific, sorry. And then these guys will go out and do a certain mission. And then we also have Fraggos. Now, these things are pretty intense, and they are set up, and they're usually timed throughout the afternoon. And unfortunately, not every platoon or every squad may be involved in these, but we do try to spread them out all throughout the day and get people to do these. And so you could go to Ironhorse and you could drop 4 or 5 flags, change it, do real estate capture, get a mission, get a Fraggo, and you've basically hit the home run. Or you could do a couple flags, get one mission, no Fraggos, and still have a blast. So, and that's the challenge that we face as AMS, is because the AOs are large. A lot of times we'll get anywhere between 5 and 700 players. Or Arsenal, last year we had 1,100. That was crazy. And our goal is to make sure the players get engaged as much as possible. So I think rather than having one specific direction that we want the game to go in, there is multiple levels of things to do, as well as the dynamics of the CO on both teams working with game control to constantly change the dynamic throughout the game to get as many people involved in as many things as possible. And believe me when I tell you that's a challenge,
Mhm.
it's an understatement. But we
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
do try to do it, and a lot of it, like I said before, it falls on the player. So if they're involved in
Definitely.
squads, working with their medic, they have their map, they're getting engaged at the fob, they can easily get involved all day long, whether it's a bunch of missions, fraggos, etc. But we do a lot. There is a lot out there to do,
Yeah.
and it's our goal is to make sure that we touch as many players as possible where they can get involved in these missions and fragos. And there's usually a lot. So that's
Yeah.
kind of encompasses what we do. We cast the largest net, therefore we have to really radicalize our game design to drop and to cater to all those different levels of players.
Mhm.
They're
And I mean, like there are certain, so no secret, there's lots of airsofters that, like to get in character. And I'm just wondering,
right.
what can you tell me about Malibu Bow?
Hmm. I don't even know where that comes from. That is a patch that somebody came up with, and I don't even know. I really don't know, honestly. I think that's more of a some kind of buddy making fun of me back in the day, or I don't know what it is. But we all have funny things. Like Cody's got his thing where it's called Cody's Crew, and we do Malibu Bow, and I think it's just like inside jokes making fun of us, but it's pretty funny. I'm not really sure where that came about, but it's crazy.
And I think the reason I like to ask you that question is because it makes you laugh, but like also I think it sort of talks about one of the things that airsoft is all about, which is like we're supposed to have fun, right? We're
Yeah,
supposed to be out there, not taking it too seriously. And like I think one of the reasons, one of the appeals for us looking at AMS as the first time we would ever travel to a big event is that yes, it is Milsim, but it's also not intimidating in the way that Milsim can often be, with being super strict with rules and not a welcoming environment for new players, for example. And so to me, it's like, okay, well, you know what? This is actually, not only is this going to be a tremendous experience, but we're going to have a lot of fun. Like it's going to be fun. That's the whole purpose of doing that. And so that's why I wanted to bring up Malibu Bow a little bit, right?
it is, and it's funny, and that's And that's really what it's all about. And I tell people in the safety briefing a lot, and it's one of my, not my famous lines, but I always tell people, I'm like, look, at the end of the day, you're spending a lot of money to get here. You're leaving work, you're leaving your family, you're buying new gear and guns, you're spending money in the AMP trailer on site. You're spending money on hotels and rental cars and food. And, you're coming here to hang with your friends, have a good time, and make the best of this weekend. And we, obviously we want to have a lot of structure and we want to have as many things for people to do as we can. But there's nothing better than walking through camp or walking through in the morning before the morning briefing and seeing the faces of everybody and knowing what they're about to get involved in and have a good time, because we want it to be hardcore. We want to have strict rules on, on the uniforms and want them to follow our rule set and et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, it's not over the top, but
Mm-hmm.
it is enough to where, hey man, if every single person follows the rules, imagine what a great game we'd have this weekend. And
Yeah,
that's what I tell
absolutely.
everybody. I'm like, you'd have airsoft before you. So it's important for everybody to do their part. And a big part of that is just going out and having fun, being
Mm.
with your friends and having fun and taking advantage of the weekend, because as little time as we have these days, you might as well enjoy it while you can.
Well, that's right. And
So,
so you said something just earlier. You said, well, it's, a lot of the onus is on the player to take responsibility to go find things to do, to be
right.
entrepreneurial, let's call it, right?
Mhm.
But also, I think there's a part of that which you're just describing, which is we also want to make sure that we are, having a good experience for ourselves, but also creating a positive environment for the people around us too, right?
Right.
By adhering to the rule set, yeah, you're following the rules, great, but you following the rules also helps make a better experience for your buddy because you're wearing
Exactly.
camo and they're wearing the same camo, and now you feel like a team as opposed to this guy's just doing whatever and then you're doing whatever, and it's more disparate. And
That's right.
especially when it comes to rules, like I think large scenarios and large events of any type really have a huge framework around them. Some of the stuff is the boring stuff like safety, insurance, like that
Right.
kind of stuff. But you've also got the gameplay rules. And I think many players, especially those who have not had any sort of event running experience before, might see certain decisions about rules in particular sort of being made, off the cuff, right? Or without considering the broader impact. And I, just to two quick examples. I know you guys changed your DMR rules relatively recently,
Right.
or you changed the start time for Ironhorse to avoid the midday heat, right? And I know that it's not something that gets done on the fly like that, but I'm curious from your perspective, what goes into making it decisions like that, and like how much do you use or do when you obviously you seek it out, but how much you use player feedback to make these kinds of decisions?
Well, the DMR thing started long ago, and we were just having issues with not being able to ID certain rifles and people overshooting. And we just thought, look, until we can get a handle on something and have a good rule set for that, then we would implement the DMR. And we literally waited year, 2 years, and we would talk to a random player, a veteran player, and be like, look, what do you want to see out of this? Like, what do you see a DMR being done? I mean, being used as, or what's the
Mm,
advantage you think a DMR needs? And, in this day and age, we're moving in technology so fast where whether it's you're getting a custom gun by Fatco, which is one of our sponsors, or anybody else, these AEGs and these HPA guns, they're insane and they go a long
mm,
way. They're getting crazy in price and they are unbelievably accurate. And I'm not saying DMRs are borderline non-existent, but we wanted to find that middle gap. So we asked a lot of players and we accumulated the feedback. And sure, you're going to have a couple people like, it's not enough mags, or that, that engagement distance is too short, or we understand that. But we can't really please everyone, but we found the medium by talking to all the players. And ESR was the first DMR game back in a while. And I made a point to go visit with a lot of these people after the game. And they're like, perfect, perfect. I got literally four emails, which is a shocker, from DMR users explaining their experience for the first time in a while and how wonderful it was. And they'd like to see this, but they understand why, et cetera, et cetera. So that the DMR really worked out. And I think we were patient. We wanted
mm.
to wait, make sure we were making a good move that worked, and we did. And moving on to Iron Horse, at these big venues, we don't get to choose the date, right? We're
Yeah.
very fortunate in this industry to call up my buddy at Guardian and say, okay, we want to come back, and he goes, well, here's your date. Like it's
Hmm.
not up to us. So, between Arsenal at Mtskatatuk, Copperhead, we know it's set the weekend it always is. Guardian, Copperhead, Arsenal, probably those are the main three right now that we have to go off their date. So when they told us June, the middle of June, we were obviously concerned about the heat. And my buddy called me back and he's like, listen, Bo, I hate to do this, but we had a DOD contract come through and I have to move you 2 weeks. So obviously I was bummed and very upset for the people that have already made plans and bought plane tickets, et cetera. But the good news
Hmm.
is it's within arm's reach. It's only 2 weeks further down the road, not a month down the road or 4 months for that matter. So luckily, always try to look at the bright side of things. Guardian Center allows us to flip on all the lights inside and out. It's a very dynamic AO, so we can literally turn night into day. Very easy.
Hmm.
And with that being said, we said, look, we did it before. It's going to be different. We even were toying with a 24-hour straight, but we weren't really sure about that because we haven't done it before. And we looked at the building, the structures, and our game design and said, look, this will work. The players will be a little
Hmm.
bummed, but we're going to go to midnight. So just like anything else, I mean, half the time, most of these people are staying up late anyway. I know I do. And I think that it would work very well with our stuff. The beginning, it's going to be a little warm. Everybody's checking in on Friday and hanging out. But by the time the game really gets going, sun's going to start going down. We're going to flip on the lights, and it's going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to how well that's going to play into the night. And the great thing about also with Guardian is that even if all the lights are on inside and out, there's plenty of places, the woods in the south, the woods in the north, the tunnel systems, and some buildings that we will leave the lights off.
Hmm.
And it will provide an unbelievable experience. This game is going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it.
I
So,
mean, you don't have to sell me. I'm already looking forward to it. I don't know how you can assume how hot it gets in Canada, which is to say not super hot. So I got
well,
a sauna to get ready because I'm not going to heat Kaz on you. But I guess to redirect the question a bit, it's not so much about these decisions in particular, but like I think it's important for people to understand like these decisions don't get made in a vacuum, right? You're not saying
right,
they're saying like, oh well, we're just going to do it this way. Like there's a process that you guys follow to
yeah,
making these things, and like you said, you waited a year to move on this DMR based on all this kind of stuff. And, like, I guess that's the point of this is to say, well, we're not making these decisions willy nilly. And I'm sure that over the years, like there are some decisions that maybe you made and, that wasn't the right call. And like, what do you
right.
do in that situation?
Absolutely. And and we have done that before. We're always looking out for the betterment of the player, the best experience we can give, and trying to make it manageable. Because, like you said a minute ago, if everybody's having a good time, following the rules, et cetera, then the experience overall is so much better. And we're always trying to find the middle ground without going too extreme on anything, and that makes it more palatable to the player base. And we have made some decisions in the past that we decided, hey man, we need to change from such and such medical rule, or making the change about the amount of ammo you're allowed to carry, or about reloading in the field. And we have gotten some feedback on that. And sometimes when it's so overwhelming that they're like, guys, you have got to change this. This does not make sense. Then we go back and look at it and go, all right, we heard the feedback. We get it. We're going to make the change. And so,
Hmm.
it's the thing that we struggle with, and I can tell you, but I love it. I really do, because it's airsoft in general, and the rules and the players and the expectations. It's constantly changing. But I
Yeah.
love going in and looking about what we can do, how we can make it better. And that's the most difficult part is you can't, the old saying, you can't keep everybody happy, but we sure try. And I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of making these decisions, taking the time, listen to the players and kind of figure it out, because it's brutal. It's brutal. I mean, this is our lifeline, and these players are our lifeline. And when they don't have fun, then it's devastating to me. It is devastating. If one player walks up to me and is like, he is miserable after 2 hours and he's having a bad experience, it breaks my heart, because I immediately take it
Well,
to fault and I want to see what we can do to make it better. So it's tough,
I
man.
mean, and that makes complete sense. I mean, you're
Yeah.
running events like my team organized event here. Like, we don't do that just because we want to run a random event. It's because we want players to have fun, and we think we can create value in that space for them
Right.
by creating these experiences. And I think you raise a really good point. Like you have a lot of players, which means that you are going to get a lot of varied opinions on
Oh, yeah,
something. Some people might say, well, your DMR rule doesn't make sense because, certain real steel guns or DMRs are not this. It's like, okay, fine, whatever.
right.
Right. But like at some point, you have to look at this. And like you said, if you get overwhelming feedback on something, maybe you need to make a switch. And I'm curious, looking back over the years, like what are some of the significant changes that you've made based on that player feedback in particular? And how did that come up?
Right off the bat, man, I don't know drastic ones. The the DMR thing was a big part of it.
Mhm.
With our ammo restrictions and mag capacity was kind of a part of it. Grenades, obviously, we made a big change to go away from tag rounds right before I guess they started going away. We had a decent little injury with one, and they're pretty violent. I love them. Don't get me wrong. I think
Mhm.
they are a huge game changer, and when used properly, that I think they're good. But we got to the point where we were using tag launchables with a 300-foot engagement distance, and people are like,
Wow.
where do you get 300 feet from? That is insane. And I'm like, well, let me ask you a
Mhm.
question. How far does your AG shoot? And how far can you throw a grenade? Right. So we've got to find the end of that and make sure that these people are being safe. I mean, we had people literally leaning out of windows at Ironhorse shooting tag launchers 30, 40 feet away from people, at people.
Mhm.
Right. And so, usually when we see things like that or players, and I think deep down inside, players are not trying to be dangerous and violent and stupid. I think you get caught up
Mhm.
in the middle of it. You're so excited trying to, get out there and get as many kills as you can and having a good time. And they get amped and things happen. I get that because I'm a firm believer that everybody's out to do good and have fun and follow the rules. I really do. But when
Mhm.
we start seeing things like that happen, we had to put on the brakes and be like, okay, we got to take a step back here with these tag launchables and figure out a new solid rule, to implement these where people aren't getting hurt. So that was one of the big things that we did change. And
Yeah.
right now they're not usable until we can figure something else out or when they kind of come back where they're abundant. But that's one of the things that we made a change on. But other than that, I can't think of any drastic changes over the years besides our bandages we use for medicing and DMR, reloading in the field, et cetera. That's about it. We haven't had anything really, really drastic since we went to single fire 7, 8 years ago. Where now, you're a rifleman is
Mhm.
semi-auto only, and the only person shoot full auto is a support weapon. And people have asked about our SMG. Can we have full auto SMG class and et cetera, et cetera? And we've never messed with that. But I think at the end of the day, if enough people begged and asked for it, then we could do that. But as of now, no. But other than that, I really can't think of anything too
Yeah.
drastic that we made changes on.
But it's interesting because those small things that you're talking about, I mean, they all add up to that experience, right? They all add up and contribute.
Yeah.
And like going, I know you guys use like ace bandages. I think is like your standard bandage for
Yep.
your medics, and like if what you were using before is well, whatever the players want to bring, or like a strip of cloth, like it adds to the experience overall. So it is small, but at the end of the day, the more you do that, you're slowly building up the sort of the building blocks of
Right.
your event and that experience for players. Um, what I guess from your perspective as well, I'm curious, like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned over the years organizing that have really stuck with you? Some of the things that you're like, either mistakes that you made, you're like, I'm not going to do that again, or things I think more importantly that you're like, we have to make sure we do this every time because it was really great.
Man, you know, thinking about it from the 10,000 foot level, I think it's basically when we make a decision about a game, I think for the most part, I think it's really the game design is where we have designed a game and it's been horrible, right?
Hmm.
So where the players come out and go, dude, I don't know what y'all were thinking. We still had fun, but A, B, and C, the way it was structured was not good. And back in the day, AMS, we were really proud to really test the limits of our game design. And crazy stuff we would try to do. And some of it was good, some of it was bad. And I think over time we have slowly reined it in a little bit where we're not quite as crazy. And I think we've gotten a little I'm not going to use the term lackadaisical, but I think we've got a little complacent here and there. And we are working now to go back to some of the days where we were doing more drastic things during the game and increasing the intensity of certain things. But I think all in all, to answer what you said, I think it hasn't been really one thing. It's more of looking into a game design that we think will work on paper, but when it's go time, it's very difficult. It becomes a very complex matter during the game, and it kind of throws everything sideways. So we kind of run through this one plan that we do that works, and we try to deviate a little bit. But other than that, I can't think of anything that is on the end of looking at something going, man, we won't do that again. But if it is, it's a game design. It's a game design.
Mhm.
It's a
And how
Go
much do
ahead.
you use your non-marquee games, like like your smaller games, your local games, to play test gameplay ideas for your larger games? Is that something that you guys do?
Well, we do that a little bit. We have implemented our local games, which have been incredible these last couple of years, that really give these younger players the confidence to move forward to a bigger game. If you're a first time airsofter, milsim or whatever, and you play at a local field and you're a regional guy and you haven't really got to travel, and somebody says, "Hey, do you want to go to Arsenal? Do you want to go to Copperhead?" You're like, "Wait a minute. I don't know if I'm ready for that." Right.
Mhm.
And it becomes intimidating. So the locals is a good way to bring people in, and they play the local game. They get to see the organizational piece, read all the emails, the op ords that come from command, and start getting their feelers out and getting comfortable. And they go, you know what? I think I'm ready for a bigger game. And so we do implement smaller things at these local games that we, on a much smaller level, to see if we can implement them bigger ones. But the only thing that hinders us from doing anything too drastic is because the AOs at our local games are much smaller. So you're
Mhm.
looking at 50, 60, 70 acres at a D14 for Southern Front as compared to 4 or 500 for something like Copperhead, right? So it's more of
Yeah.
little missions or a certain Fraggo type that we will experiment with to see how it played out, right? And
Right.
that's really what we do for the most part.
I'm curious too, like, you said you've organized 80 games. 5 of them, 6 of them this year is going to be Iron Horse 6, right?
Correct.
Like it's multiple times at the same AO. And I mean, how do you build in I mean, as a former video game store owner, right? Like
Right.
how do you build in replayability on the same maps, so to speak? Like what is it, especially given the cost of the ticket, which is not negligible,
Right.
especially in Canadian dollars. P.S.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, what? How do you make sure that someone who's been to Iron Horse and played, at the Guardian Center like twice wants to come a third time, a fourth time, and you get these repeat players?
That that is the secret sauce, and that is what we're always striving for. There are some AOs that are difficult to play and difficult
Mhm.
to organize, and Iron Horse is it leans on the more difficult because of the way the tunnel systems go and because of the linear, the way the field is set up linear wise. The pond and the flooded town also hinder ideal fob locations. So we obviously, when we go to somewhere new, like let's say Arsenal last year, we had over 1,100 players. That AO is tremendously, I mean, the place is insanely huge. And we look at it, obviously in the site visit, and then we look at it after the game or during the game and see how the fob placements. But that is the key. The fob placements are the key to our games. And I think you can drastically change a game design based on the fob placements. And then we
Mhm.
implement things such as a U-Haul for transportation, or what we have is our aid stations. And we have never implemented aid stations at Iron Horse, but this year we are. And so, lesson learned, kind of referring back to your question earlier, Iron Horse last year was difficult. We sold a lot of tickets. And at the end, a lot of players were begging to come. And we had already hit our 650 mark. And we said, man, we can't sell anymore. The field's going to be too full. And people kept begging. And we don't, I mean, obviously it's nice to sell more tickets, but then the game and the gameplay can be impeded by overcrowding. And we just, I know this is a long winded answer, but we refer back to the player base. And a lot of times, this sounds crazy, but this is the reality. A lot of times we will go to Perry, Georgia, and one team will be stacked full of all stars. It just
Mhm.
happens. And people
Yeah.
go, well, that's crazy. No, it's not crazy. One team could have 60% players that have been to maybe one AMS game or it's their first game, et cetera. And then the other team is full of AMS veterans, squared away, calm squared away. They know each other's game style. They know the AO. They've been there. And what happens when you take an all-star team versus new players, the game gets lopsided very fast, no matter how much you can control it. And that's what the
Hmm.
players don't understand is that we want to give them freedom to play without scripting the game. But at the same time, based on the facts you and I were talking about a minute ago, you start going all around the country and it's a crapshoot, of
Yeah.
what kind of players you're going to get. So, and I know we're kind of deviating from your answer, but really what we try to do is say, okay, what worked last year? Well, that didn't work. So, okay, we're going to move the fobs. And then we're also going to implement a U-Haul going this direction. And then we need to enter aid stations. And then let's change the whole dynamic of the game from not just SAM sites or downloading satellite arrays or setting up A, B, and C. We're also going to implement this, right? And try to get players to do that, different types of missions, et cetera. But that is hard. That's one of the hardest things. I mean, it's a very good
Hmm.
question. And for the players that have been to 7 Copperheads, they go for the experience, they go for the AO, they go for their friends and family that are going. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's difficult to create a
Yeah.
brand new experience. And, it's tough. It is tough. And sometimes we're successful at it. And sometimes I think we're still learning. After 80 games, we are still learning. And my gosh, it's a constant state of learning, man. It really is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I hear you. We play, like I said to you earlier, like we're a very small community. We have one single field that we play at. And so every single game that we organize, we have to find new ways to exploit the same space and
Yeah.
keep people engaged. Thankfully, we haven't hit the 80 mark, so nobody's gotten bored yet. But I'll let you know when, if and when that
Right.
happens.
That'd be a good
I
thing.
want to talk. I want to talk about Iron Horse specifically now because I mentioned to you, I think a couple times so far, but myself and 23 other members of the Storm Riders Foreign Legion. So that's
Wow.
my team and
That's
people
awesome.
from all around America, from California and from Maryland and Philadelphia and you name it. We're all meeting in Perry, Georgia. We're all coming down to play Iron Horse, and there's some people who are coming. They're not even playing; they've got a media pass, and they're just going to hang out with us, and it's going to be a great time.
That's going to be
But
awesome.
in this group of players, we have players who have played Iron Horse multiple times. We have players who've played Copperhead multiple times.
Good.
We have players who've played, all kinds of AMS games. Who've played, Milsim West, some other types of games. I don't know. I can't remember. Regardless, lots of military Milsim experience, but also schlubs like me who have never really played a Milsim, never really played a game with a huge number of players, and a lot of players who are American, who this is really their first, let's say, national level event,
Right.
right? Now, we are committed to being squared away and we are doing like sessions and comms and all this kind of stuff. And we're also very entrepreneurial. So we're going to be busy. And we've been working with Rich and pretty closely telling him, like, you give us stuff to do and it'll get done. But all this to say, what would be like your top 3 pieces of advice for me, understanding that I've never done an event like this. Like, it could be like rookie mistakes I should avoid, essential things you think I should need to bring with me that I haven't probably thought about, or even just like the best way to approach this event in general. What would you suggest?
I would suggest, obviously, we can start from the top. I would say kit is going to be super important. You definitely want to run light because it will be warm.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you do have the dynamic aspect of playing indoors where it gets very violent. A lot of these buildings it's crazy 2, 3 stories, ladders up close. People are shooting a lot of grenades, et cetera. So you want to definitely have a lower mesh. I believe now, this day and age, where if you're not wearing any type of lower face protection, you're crazy. I mean, I know it doesn't look as cool. I get that because believe me, I used to think cool over functionality forever until I got shot in the mouth. And
Yeah.
I see it happen all the time. A guy took a round to the mouth this past weekend, lost his whole front tooth. And I would say you got to have one of those. Kit, light, I'd run chest rig, I'd run whatever light gear you can have. Real good comms. Make sure you guys are squared away on comms before you come to the event. If not, Rich will help you, right?
Hmm.
That's going to be your main factor of staying together, talking, and working together. If you have a guy in your squad that is going to be a medic, that is going to run a medic, make sure that they pay attention pretty hardcore during the safety briefing and keep your medic with you. It's like I tell everybody, AMS is not open play, right? And we are, especially to an event like this, where the goal is to get to the fob, understand what you got to do, have Rich or a combat controller walk you over to the mission table. You look at it, you figure out your infill point, what you have to do, your exfil point, make sure your medic's with you, and run these missions and these Fraggos and everything that Rich tells you to do all day long, right? That's the main goal.
Mhm.
But I would tell you to kind of breeze, if I were speaking to you or anybody kind of our first time at a big event, I would breeze through the rule set for the most part. I would look at photos of the AO and understand kind of how big it really is and what's all entailed, and ask Rich a lot of questions of simple things you may not know, and make sure your uniform's correct. That's huge, right? Good eye pro is solid. We are doing a lot of videos right now in the works that will be our full safety briefing, broken up into each section on our amsrules.net or amsrules.com website page, et cetera. We're doing a separate page.
Mhm.
Expectation videos, all that kind of stuff. And one of the things we talk about is a fob bag. And
Yeah.
and contrary to some other opinions, et cetera, the fob bag is very important for our game, because our goal is to get you to leave morning briefing, go to the game, go to the fob, dump your stuff, jam all day long. Don't go back to the car. Don't go leave. You can, obviously, but go
Mhm.
to the fob, be engaged, hang out with the players, pull out your water, snacks, extra eye pro, night vision. I don't care what you bring it in a backpack that can sustain you all day. Our games are extremely difficult based on your level of enthusiasm, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it makes 100% sense.
if we have start X, hypothetically, let's say at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in Ironhorse, it's going to go until midnight nonstop. If you
Mhm.
want to run, shoot, respawn, run, shoot, you can do that straight until index, right? And so we obviously encourage players to play as hard as they can, but take advantage of the breaks. Whereas Rich says, I need you guys to go to building AA, hold the third floor. At that moment, take a break, get some water, chill, understand what you're doing, utilize those breaks all day long so you can sustain all day. That's
Yeah.
that's what I want to see players do, is to say, hey man, I got everything I need in my bag. I'm going to bring the essentials with me to the fob. And when I do go to the fob to take off my bandages, get some food, rest a little bit, everything will be there. And when Rich or my platoon leader or my squad leader rolls up and pops me on the head and it's like, dude, let's go. We got something to do. You're ready to go. Right. Rather than
Mhm.
being gone. So that's, being involved in the fob is a big part of it. Also, I would highly recommend going on the UFS and cost Facebook pages and ask questions there. There's 3 to 4,000 members, hypothetically, per page, and a lot of
Mhm.
people that are a lot of veteran AMS players are on there answering questions all the time about stuff like that. I'd highly recommend people to do that and take on the role of their player, of their faction, and that's really it. I would say being on time, and the big part of it is obviously being there on Friday. Get there on Friday,
Yeah.
come hang out, get registered, shop a little bit, hang out with the friends, hang out all night, see the sponsors, and just kind of take in Friday. A lot of people don't show up till
Yeah.
Saturday. We get that. That's, work or family, et cetera. We get it. But obviously you guys are coming all this way. Friday is the way to do it. And
Yeah, and
get used to it.
yeah, and like I was, like I said to the guys, I'm like, I'm not traveling to the United States to play a huge airsoft game, which is costing, tons of Canadian money,
Right.
to sit around in the fob for hours. Like, let's go. Like, there's stuff to be
Yes.
doing. Let's do it, right? But
Yes.
also understanding, like physical limitations are a real thing, right? And like, as a side note, like I do a lot of endurance running and all this kind of stuff, so I'm good to go. But I don't know the heat,
The,
right?
the,
So
the
someone
heat
who else
is
who's coming in from Canada, like if you're not prepared for that, that could be a shocker. You got to be careful too.
it is. I'm
But
telling you, it's brutal. It's brutal.
mhm. Yeah, I know there's at least one guy who was going to play with us, and he's like, you know what? If it's going to be in June, I can't. It's too tough. But I'm curious though, like, what is a piece of kit that you is essential for you that you think you is probably not standard, but like you can't live without it. Like you have to have it, otherwise you're not having a good day of airsoft.
Is a very light. Well, obviously the basics like solid eye pro, a sling, a good chest
Hmm.
rig, whatever I'm going to use for the event. But what I like to bring is a bag that I helped develop when I was with LBT for 10 years. It's a very small bag, but it's a small little assault bag. It's tiny. It's a little backpack. You see these kids roll with these bags that are, you know, huge 50, 60 liters,
Yeah.
70 liters. I mean, it's crazy. You don't need that, right? So a small bag that would have like an extra bottle of water for me, maybe an extra dead rag, extra iPro in case it gets busted, just light. You can't reload in the field, so you don't need to bring BBs in a loader. But
Hmm.
it's always a good thing in case you decide mid game to take off your combat shirt, roll it up, throw it in the back, right? Or if you
Yeah.
want to grab some water, you can. Your iPro, have a problem with it on the field, switch it out. We don't obviously condone taking off iPro in the middle of a game, but we get it. But having just the basic little things that you might need on you in the field, I would never go out there without a small pack that it can have just some
Hmm.
of the little things that I need. I don't think I've ever played without one. Even if it's a mini map or something that's attached via Molly to your plate carrier, that's fine. But I love to be able to take the bag off, and sit down and pull stuff out of it, utilize it and put it back on. Right.
Yeah.
But something small. I'm talking these little bitty 15, 18-liter bags that are tiny. But
Hmm.
to me, that's the way to go, right? Gloves, 100%. I would definitely wear gloves. Good eye pro. I'm a helmet fan when it comes to playing in very shady conditions or places. But Guardian, I mean, obviously we love everybody to wear a helmet, but something that's a boonie that's vented, get you out of the sun, keep your head cool is always a good thing to have. So
What's your go-to snack when you're playing?
honestly, beef jerky and Cliff Bars.
No way.
Yes.
Serious.
Yes. So I always have a big bag of, there's a couple different beef jerkies I like, but I like the beef jerky for the, obviously the meat and the salt, and then a
Hmm.
Cliff Bar or two on me and a bottle of water. So I'm a very light eater on game days. When I play, it's been a while, but when I do play, it is a Cliff Bar, a ton of water in the morning, and I'm on the sugar-free liquid IVs. And I think one or
Oh
two of those
yeah.
a day is good. So our
Yeah.
guy who is our medic is actually who comes to the majority of our events. He is Oklahoma City SWAT, and he is
Okay.
the head guy and their head medic. And he is kind of against the salt pills. And he just says, "Look,
Hmm.
man, I mean, the liquid IV, sugar free is fine, water's fine, not too much Gatorade because you kind of overdo it. You got to be careful. Definitely no energy drinks, but that's my thing, dude. Water, liquid IV. I'm the kind of guy that will carry a little hydro flask with water in it and
Yep.
ice, and I like the cold out there, just a little on my neck, etc. But that's really it.
So, last question for you here. There's been lots of change we talked about throughout the episode with the Iron Horse and like
Yep.
the dates and stuff like that. And it is what it is. Like that. There's no there's no it's that kind of stuff happens. But I'm
Yeah.
I'm really curious. Despite all of this, what are you most looking forward to at Iron Horse this year? What is the one thing that you're really just like I can't wait to see this?
This new implementation of our game design is, I'm excited about what we're going to do this year. This will be the first time that we're going to run aid stations. Not sure if they're going to be capturable or not, but they're definitely going to be to where you can turn them off, etc. For lack of better verbiage, decommissioned, I guess. That, and just to see the players again, I'm very excited. Like, not to go back to what we were talking about earlier, but we have had a lot of really fantastic games. I'll be the first person to tell you, but we've also had some tough ones. And just as any company, we go through it all. And I was telling Cody, the other owner, I said, "Man, I think Iron Horse is going to be a litmus test for us to see how well we do in tickets based on last year's game." And we have a lot of new players this year, which is good. And we sold out, and I'm still getting emails every day for tickets, and I can't sell anymore. And to me,
Mhm.
man, it's a wonderful feeling for people to want to come to something you work so hard to put on. And it's a big sense of responsibility to provide for these players. You're coming all the way from Canada. Naturally, that's going to be on my mind the whole time. And all these players that are spending their time, because I say it all the time, and the most valuable thing you can give somebody is your time. And when people give us their time on a weekend, I really want them to have a good time. And I would honestly say the one thing I'm looking forward to is the feedback from players Saturday and Sunday and the time that I get with them after raffle, and them to walk up to me and said, "Hey man, my first big event, it was unbelievable. I had the best time. A, B, and C happened while we're out there. Bo, thank you so much for putting on the game." And that almost sometimes brings me to tears because we let me tell you, we work very, very hard, and there is a lot that goes into these games, man. Between the yearly stuff we have to do all year, but it's the players, the sponsors, the venue, the emails, and I mean, there's so much that goes on to making these events happen. But I'm ready for the first player to walk up to me and be like, on Saturday, 2 or 3 hours after game start, and go, "Dude, this is awesome." I mean, that's all I care about, really. At the end of the day, I do not care but anything but that.
Well, I can't guarantee you that I'll be the first person to come do that for you, but I'm really very much looking forward to
I hope
coming,
so.
meeting you and shaking your hands
I hope so. I hope so,
while we
man.
get there, man. Well, Bo, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and have this discussion with us. It's always a privilege for me to be able to meet people like yourselves who are doing so much like incredible stuff in the airsoft scene, and I know I'm very fortunate to be able to get to experience it this year. I cannot wait. I know it's going to be a great time.
Oh man, thank
Um,
you. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. That's for sure.
well, that's awesome, guys. That's all we've got for you this week, Bo. Thanks again for being with us. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much.